topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. And it's a beautiful day today. Sun is shining. It's Tuesday. I'm here with you. So, music is something that's a universal language that transcends boundaries, borders, and humans. And what has music got to do with leadership? That's what we will be exploring today. And also, I want to thank each and every one of you who have got our books, especially in today's world where there is so much noise if you're looking to become an influencer. And now those days are gone where AI was just a question mark. It's here to stay. And AI is already stepping into our daily lives. So how can you get ahead of it? How can you develop skills? And how can you not lose the existing skills? If you're looking for it, I invite you to check out our books, and also know that partial proceeds from our books go to kiva.org because it's important to help each other out. Well, let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Charles.
Hello, Divya. Good to see you. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Looking forward to it as well. So, Charles, tell us, do you recall a moment or a person in your life that left a positive mark on you?
Oh, gosh, so many. I have had a succession of heroes in my life. There might be reasons why we might explore those, why I've had them. But yes, ever since I was little, it could be, so I play the guitar, the classic guitar. So all those years ago, a big influence when I was in my teens was a guitarist called John Williams, who I still believe is absolutely at the peak of the guitar world. I mean, he's now in his 80s, so he's okay. Maybe not currently, but he's a giant in the world of music. But I suppose, and then there have been philosophers, there have been scientists, because I'm very interested in physics, so I could talk about Richard Feynman, the physicist. But I think when I think of really important people, I mean, these are not people I have met, obviously. I think of the great composers, because I have those people in my mind all the time. So I always have music in my head. I used to think everyone must, but I don't think they do. But I do. I have music going round in my head as we speak. And the great composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, etc., are absolute giants of Western civilization. And if I had to pick one of them, it would be Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. And so to have somebody like that, if you like, looking over your shoulder all the time, I mean, these are such giants that it stops you getting above yourself, I think, when you realize what real unimaginable genius is. And I said it could be Beethoven, it could be Mozart. In the world of art, I mean, it's not just music, but it's music for me. In the world of art, it could be Rembrandt. In the world of literature, it could be a whole host. It could be Solzhenitsyn. It could be all sorts of people. So, but these are truly impressive people. So, but for me, it would be Bach, I think. Yeah.
And what impression did he leave on you?
Well, I think, Bach covers, as music does, every possible emotion. It conveys all the things that words can't. It really starts where words stop, if you like. Or they certainly do for me. And I think of all the emotions. I mean, you can think of the tragedy, but for me, I think Bach does joy better than anyone else. I certainly think of Beethoven as being joyous. There aren't many works of his that when I think of joy, but there are so many, and that's fine. I mean, he does lots of other things. Beethoven is wonderful, but Bach does do joy, and I think joy is pretty important. Actually, I think it
is because if you think about it, all of us, whether we are aiming to go on vacation or, kids are studying, getting that education, getting a better life, what does that bring us? It brings us joy at the end of the day, spending time with family, spending holidays. So definitely joy is a very, very important emotion.
Yeah.
I do like that, although I gotta say that I am partial to Mozart and Beethoven.
That's okay. Yes, we're not going to fall out on that one. Yeah. I mean, you asked about people who've had a big influence.
Yes.
There's a musician. So Daniel Barenboim, who is now in his 80s, so almost retired, but he has been an absolute giant in the world of music.
And that's the beauty of conversations. Now you mentioned about Bach and joy. I'm going to look at his music, listen to it, and experience it in a completely different way. And that's the beauty that we bring out as we go and talk about different things.
Sure. Yes.
So tell us, how did you get into music and how did music become your life?
Well, I was a chorister as a little boy. Just by chance, I went to a school. So I wasn't a chorister in a cathedral, but I was a chorister at school. We had a chapel. I went to a posh school, and so we had a chapel, and therefore from a young age, I did services every day, even on Saturdays and Sundays. So I just grew up in that tradition. And for me, it wasn't. I mean, of course, it's religious, but that wasn't what did it for me at all. I mean, yes, I've heard lots of sermons, I've heard lots of Bible readings, but it wasn't the words that got me, but the music absolutely did. So I had a very good grounding in that you learn how to sight read, and you learn how to perform at a very high level. So, and I was also lucky that I lived near Liverpool, and when I was 12 and 13, there were two big concerts that the Liverpool Philharmonic gave, which required, as well as an orchestra and a choir, it required a children's choir. And so one of them, when I was 13, there was a new cathedral opened in Liverpool. Now, cathedrals aren't built and opened very often. And they put this big piece on by Berlioz, a setting of his Te Deum, and it was so it needs huge forces, and so we were involved in that. It was also televised, so for me as a 13-year-old, I think I was more interested in watching all these TV cameras sort of whirring around the cathedral. But what that really introduced me to was working at a professional level. I I wasn't being paid for it, so I'm not professional in the strict sense. But I got at a very early age, 12 and 13, to know what a professional standard is when you're working with a professional orchestra and a professional conductor. And once you've learned that, you never go back. So simple things like you go to a rehearsal and you don't talk, you don't chatter. And it's surprising when you go to an amateur choir, part of it is social. So they like to have a bit of a natter while the other people are singing. Well, you just don't do that. And I never do. And that can be, of course, frustrating or it can also make me seem antisocial. But no, I just like to go for the high standard. So I was very fortunate in that. And then I've just sung in choirs ever since. And again, at a high standard. I sang with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields for 20 years. And we went all over the world and all over Europe. So I've been extremely fortunate to experience this.
And what leadership lessons have you brought back from those journeys?
Gosh, well, there are so many things that I think we can learn from and it's not just leaders as well. I mean, you didn't say that, but you did say we, and that's an important thing. It's not just leaders, because when we think of leaders, we tend to think of people in the military or the big business or politics. Well, yeah, they could learn, but it's all of us that can learn from the world of music, because we all are leaders in a way. We all have access to leadership. And that's one of the things I always like to get across, that leaders and leadership are different concepts. And we all, whether it's in our work, but also in our communities, we can show leadership. In our families, we can show leadership. As parents, what sort of leadership do we show to our children? As a partner, what leadership do I show to my partner or my spouse, and vice versa? So this is terribly important. So some of the lessons, I suppose the most obvious one is listening. I mean, that's what musicians do. That is the thing that separates them from other people. That's the skill that they've really developed. Just like artists have developed a way of seeing. I remember my mother was an art teacher, and I remember her when I was little, she was painting something, and some flowers, and she said she pointed to some leaves in this still life, that a bunch of flowers that she had, and said, "What color's that?" Well, obviously they were leaves. So I said, "Well, they're green." And then she pointed out, "Well, they're almost every color but green. There are purples, there are oranges, there are yellows, there are reds in that, if you really learn to see." And that's what artists can do. Likewise, musicians, what they can do is hear and listen. Not just hear, but really listen. And that's listening to, if I'm singing in the cathedral, of course, I'm listening to the people on either side. So, am I blending with them? Because we have to blend together. But also, I'm listening to myself. Am I really doing what I think I'm doing? I mean, I think I'm singing in tune. I think that note is in tune, but is it really? Is it a bit flat? Is it a bit sharp? I think it was on time, but was it a bit late, a bit early? So you're always ruthlessly listening to yourself and looking at yourself. And that's a thing which we all have to do. I mean, we have to do it in work, really check, am I really, what is going on here? But likewise, we should do it with our family. How about if we sat around the kitchen table and said, "This is what I think's going on. This is how I think I've behaved. But hey, kids, what do you think? Tell me. Be honest." Now, of course, I can then go back to them, of course, and then say, well, this is how you think you behaved. This is how I see it. But then we create a dialogue, and that's hugely important, I think. Yeah. So that's just one lesson from the world of music.
You're opening the doors for conversation. And when conversation and dialogues happen, that's when the barriers break. And you start building trust, which is the foundation of any relationship. And if you're talking about orchestra, I mean, I don't have a musical note in my body. I can listen and I can experience it. But that said, like you said, everyone doing their piece at the right time, in the right order, and just that right amount for everyone to come together and sound beautiful. So many times what happens,
and I'll just correct you there, if you like, if I may, in that you said, a few minutes ago you were talking about your love of Beethoven and Mozart, and then you've just said, I don't have a musical bone in your body, by which I'm presuming you say you're meaning you don't play the piano or you don't play an instrument, or no. That's one part of being a musician, is being able to play. But if we just play to nobody, that's no good at all. We need it's a coming together of performers and listeners. You need the two together. Just like you can't have one without the other, really. Just like if you think of a magnet, a simple bar magnet, and you have a North Pole and a South Pole, you can't have one without the other. If we perform, we need listeners. And just because you don't play an instrument doesn't matter. You are musical. So let's just get that one right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about leaders, so leaders are like conductors. And if you're a conductor, you want to bring in that whole team. You want to have them in harmony. You want to have a cohesive team. But so many times what happens is that, especially when individual contributors are promoted to become leaders, then they have not been trained to be leaders. And then they bring in micromanagement. So how can leaders tend to stay away from it and yet create that harmony in the team?
I think it comes down to how we listen. So, and how conductors listen. So because micromanagement does have a place. If you overplay it, of course, if that's all you do, that's no good. Because it's just stultifying it. We go nowhere. But it is important. So one of the things that conductors have to do is they listen. And I'll say this, I'll explain this. They listen both vertically and horizontally. I'll explain what I mean. So they listen horizontally. Now, let's imagine you're playing you're conducting a Beethoven symphony. Lasts 45 minutes. Now, in any big piece, in any piece of music, there is a climax. The point that you're really moving towards. It's the absolute center of the whole work. It might be, very often it's in the slow movement, in the third movement, where that's the emotional peak of the whole piece. There are other peaks, of course, but that is the one. And you have to have that in mind. When you start off, as you give your downbeat, you've got that moment, half an hour away, 35 minutes away, that you're aiming towards, that everything is judged in relation to that, because you don't want to be too loud too early, because otherwise that won't have the impact. It's a bit like going on a walk. Say you're going on a walk in the countryside, and it's going to be up and down, but you can see in the distance that's the highest hill that we're going to have to go over. So it's a bit like that. You're judging everything by that. So you have to do that. You have to think horizontally as a conductor, so you know where you're going. But at the same time, you can't just do that. You have to think vertically, i.e., this moment, this chord that the orchestra is playing, is it completely in tune? Because it might not be, because they actually, the people in front, they're so busy playing that it's not always easy to hear. In fact, very often it's not possible to hear. You know, if the French horns are playing flat out, they cannot hear the cellos, and vice versa. So the only person that can is the conductor, because the conductor standing in front has got this helicopter view, if you like, can hear everything in more of a balance. So you're thinking vertically. As they're playing that, is it exactly together? Is it in tune? Is it balanced? Because maybe I need a bit more cello here. Maybe the horns are a bit loud. They're in tune, but they're a bit loud. So I need constantly, you're shuffling it around. Now, if you just do that, we go nowhere. But you have to do both. And that's really micromanagement of just saying, or pointing to them, they need to be brought up. They need to be quietened down. Now, it's just the same, of course, in the workplace. You know, if you're the CEO, you have to be thinking, okay, what's going to happen in, Q3, Q4, next year, 2027? And how are we moving forward? What's the 12-month plan? What are the milestones en route? But if we just do that, then the whole thing can fall apart. So you have to also, while you're doing that, think, okay, this week, what's going on here? And you have to hear from the different divisions. And are we really doing what we think we do? So, and that comes very much down to micromanagement. So you have to balance the two, I think. And you can't have one without the other. Again, like the magnet.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what I'm hearing is that you talked about like hearing cello and different music instruments. So similarly, whether you're a leader, and like you mentioned, anybody can be a leader. It's not just about the title. It is about listening to people who they could be your peers, or they could be your reports. And what is that every person thinking, where they're at? And are you in tune with them? Because that listening, that deep listening, is what's going to let you know where to manage those expectations, where you are enabling and empowering your team members to grow, to have that agency for themselves. Because
Yes.
if you think about it, in orchestra, right, you're bringing in the right people, and also you're training them. Like, there's so many practices, like just like sports, there is that repetition. So how are you bringing together that people are playing in harmony? So this definitely applies to leadership. Now, I'm curious, what are some of your experiences as you worked with Google, British Airways, McDonald's, companies like that? What are some of the experiences that you took forward in your life?
With McDonald's, I was lucky to run some courses over in Chicago. That's where their headquarters is, on the south side of Chicago. And they have a huge campus there, including one of their main training facilities, which is known as the Hamburger University. And it's so easy. Or I should back up there. I was a bit thinking, well, McDonald's, it's about hamburgers. Really? Is this going to be a great place? And I've been doing this type of work now for a long time, coming up to 30 years. And the people at McDonald's were the proudest people that I'd ever come across, ever. They were so proud of where they worked, justifiably. I mean, it's a hell of an organization. Whatever we think, it's an amazing organization. I mean, it's a glorious campus for a start, and there are lakes and fountains and all of that. But they purposely wanted. I was there for 4 days, and they wanted to take me round. They took me round to give me a tour to see how this place works, and it's hugely impressive. And as we often say about McDonald's, when you go into a McDonald's, whether it's in San Francisco or Shrewsbury, which is where I live over here, or anywhere else, to have that level of consistency, which is terribly important to any organization. I mean, it's important with a symphony orchestra. When you go to them, you don't want to find out that, oh, tonight they're having an off night. No, no. I paid $100 for this. I don't want you to have an off night. I want it to be outstanding, and they do. Now, likewise, that when you go into a McDonald's, you know what you're going to get exactly. It never fails, and also when you think of the people that are there. Many of them are in their second language. These are not well-educated people very often. Very often they're teenagers. As somebody once said, these are kids that at home, you find it hard to get them to clean their bedroom, make their bed. And yet McDonald's can take these young people and make them into a team, a high-performing team. And you think, wow, you've got some systems in place here. This is very impressive in a way that I never imagined it would be. So that's the most obvious one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely consistency is the key. And what you mentioned was that people were proud. They are proud to be at McDonald's, and it's about building those systems.
Yeah.
So many times we don't talk about systemic thinking. People think like, oh, teams is definitely dealing with people, but at the same time, creating systems and culture that will help the team succeed. So moving a little bit away from the organizational beat, what are some of the ways, like, some of your special sauce that you use to understand your clients and colleagues? What would you share with our audience?
Oh, well, because I'm a business psychologist, so I'm interested in what makes people tick.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm really interested in that because, well, I've said that for many years. I'm interested in people. Well, I am interested in people, but I'm also interested in myself because a few years ago, 6 years ago, I had a very late diagnosis of having Asperger's, of being on the autistic spectrum, and which was we don't need to talk about it, but it was a fabulous day. I felt so liberating. But that was it was a very important day for me, and so I'm interested in other people, but to understand myself. And one of the tools I use and have used for 30 years now are personality profiles, where people, before a workshop, before they come along, they fill in a questionnaire and I create a personality profile for them. And in some ways, they're very simple documents. I mean, they can be 20 odd pages long, but in some ways they're quite simple. But the point is, it's to help us understand, be able to have a conversation. You mentioned conversation a few minutes ago, and that is the key to everything. It's the key to building trust. It's the key to connecting with other people, and we're social creatures, so we need to connect. Most of us are not hermits. We like to be with other people, but we find them irritating or difficult to understand. That's the problem.
What I was going to share is, like, when we talk about conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
We don't like to
Well,
have
yes.
conversations with everyone, and some
Well,
conversations can be very hard.
yeah. Well, and we all say, oh, we should value the differences. Well, yeah, as long as, yes, but as long as you think like I do, it's fine. That's, it's a bit of a challenge if people think really differently from us. But the best way is to talk to them. And these personality profiles, that's what it's there to do. It's to help conversation. So it helps us look at ourselves, our strengths, and our weaknesses. And you might think that most people know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Well, I would suggest, as somebody who's been doing this for a very long time, I said 30 years, most people don't. Most people do not know what their strengths are. I mean, so my son works at Deloitte over in Houston. Now he might say, well, so what's one of your strengths? Well, I know a lot about tax. Well, yes, you do know. He does know a lot about tax. That's not one of his strengths at all. I mean, come on. We're talking about other things. There are things which are far more important than knowing than the nuts and bolts of what we do. And that's what I try and help people do. That's what when I work with a team, I want everyone by the end of the session or the next few weeks to really know, what is it that they bring to that team? Why is it essential that they are there? What is it that they do that no one else in the team can do? Because there are things, and it's not saying that they're Superman or Superwoman, but there are things that they do where other people think, with you, wow, there will be people who think, I just don't know how Divya does it. It's amazing. It's quite extraordinary. It could be about how you listen, or how you make decisions, or how the detail you bring to things. It could be all sorts of things, but there'll be things that you bring that nobody else does. And that's what we want to focus on. There's, in a football team, there's no point having 11 goalkeepers or 11 strikers. You've got to have a mix. And it's the same in a team at work, same as an orchestra. We don't want just, 40 violins. We want to have that mix. So yeah, that's one of I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, because let's say, and of course, I'm a fan of personality types too. There's so many out there, and I've developed one of the types myself. And one of the types is like executor. So if somebody's an executor, they're so focused on results and getting things done, and then they miss out on some other things. And there could be empaths where they want to form the connections and they want to build that relationship. So when you're doing the project, and when you bring each one of the different types, or as you're saying, where they have strengths, so it becomes like that puzzle pieces, and together we can create that beautiful puzzle, or like beautiful music, as you're mentioning. And that's a really powerful way to kind of go. So now, okay, we have brought people, we have focused on their strengths. What has been your experience when there are differences? What are some of the good ways to resolve those?
Well, it's what we've just been talking about, is listening, really listening to people talking. Is conversation, and it's really listening, and that's hard. So in the English language, we make the distinction between hearing and listening. I don't think that happens in every language. I'm not a linguist, so I'm not sure about that. But I think we're lucky in English that we have listening. But it's hard because an awful lot of people don't do it. When they're not talking in a conversation, they're really waiting for the next pause when they can say what the next thing they want to say. They're not really listening to you. But we really need to try and see the world from somebody else's perspective.
Mhm.
But it's but it is difficult, and we don't get much training at it either. I mean, it's quite easy to find, and people go on courses for public speaking or presentation skills. I don't know of anyone that's been on a listening course. I don't know if they exist. Maybe I should start one. That would be that would be quite a good idea, perhaps. Where you get people who are really listening. I mean, a simple exercise that I sometimes start workshops with is that, especially if, well, there doesn't, especially if, I suppose, if they're people that don't know each other, but it doesn't really matter, is that, okay, this is, as soon as I've said hello to them, is, okay, well, just go off in pairs and introduce yourself to your partner. And just sort of talk about, what's brought you here, a bit about your career, why you're here. That's okay. And then you swap over, and then you come back, and then we're going to share it with the group. Except if it was you and me, I have to introduce you, and you have to introduce me, so that you really have to listen to what I'm saying, and I really have to listen to you. Now, and that's usually that can be done at 9:10 in the morning, and it suddenly makes people realize, what was it that Divya said? What? Not really sure. And I try to say, don't take notes. You've just we're only talking for a few minutes. Is just try and remember, really listen to what she's saying, and it's quite a wake up call to people, I think, that we don't listen as well as we could. But like anything, we can get better at it. Of course we can. And the rewards are enormous.
Absolutely, because the connection goes deeper and deeper when you're listening, whether it is active listening or reflective listening, listening and then ensuring that you're understanding the other person. So we have had some great conversation today, Charles. How can people connect with you and share with us? You want to share about yourself?
Well, okay, there's a website, charlesgrimes.com. I just love doing one-to-one work. To get the real depth. I mean, workshops are lovely, and I do like the energy that you get, and I like seeing people, the light bulbs that go on for people, I should say. So that's always very rewarding. But I also like one-to-one because it's the depth that you can get to. That's one of the things that I love. Is I don't do superficiality very well. I don't do small talk very well. If we have a conversation, I mean, I have a colleague who says, he loves talking. Sometimes we're away on workshops together and overnight, and he says, I love our conversations, Charles, but I can only take one night off them because of the intensity. Because I said, I don't do superficial. If I talk to you, we'll get to some depth, because that's the point, I think.
Well, in the differences lies the depth.
Yeah, I think so. Of course. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because think about it, how boring it would be if all of us were just the same.
It'd be ridiculous, of course. Yes,
exactly.
Yes, and so if we were having a conversation, if you and I were having a conversation about music, and I said earlier on, I love Bach, and you said, oh, I love Bach too. Then what? I mean, what do we say after that? But if you say, I like Bach, but I really love Beethoven and Mozart. Well, okay, now we can start talking about that. And it just deepens everything. And it would be and you might say, frankly, I don't do any of them, but I do love, Stephen Sondheim in musicals, or I love, the Beatles. I don't care what you like. It's let's have a conversation about it. Yeah, it's the depth. What does music mean to you? Or what does anything mean to you? What does family mean to you? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we are coming to the end of our show, do you want to say anything about Richard Feynman? I know you talk about it.
Oh, Richard Feynman. Yes. Well, he is, for those people who aren't aware of him, he's a physicist. You will certainly know of Einstein, obviously. And some people have said that Richard Feynman is the same as Einstein was in the first part of the last century, and Richard Feynman is the equivalent of Einstein in the second half of the century. He's one of the very few physicists that can be talked about in the same breath. An absolute giant, but not just a brilliant physicist and a mathematician, but a communicator. That is the thing that he brought. He is an outstanding, one of the great outstanding communicators of anything. He could take the most complex stuff and convey it to people. And what he was interested in is the biggest idea of all, which is the universe, the cosmos. What is things like what is light, what is time? These amazing things that we just talk about but don't understand. And he spent his life looking at them. And he is just an absolute giant. And he did it with lots of fun and joy as well. And so that's one of the things, goes back to Bach, the joy that he had in life. He also, one of his things was he eventually got the Nobel Prize in 1966, I think it was. And of course, he went over to Denmark and got the prize and presumably got lots of money for it as well. But he was very clear that wasn't the prize for him. I mean, it was okay, but it was the real prize for him was firstly discovering stuff, and then the fact that what the things he discovered, other people used, his colleagues used and built on his work. That for him was the prize, not as he said, he couldn't stand. He always referred to epaulettes, the things on your shoulders, people who have stripes, to show their status. He couldn't bear that. And I'm pretty much like that. Sure, have all your achievements, but just don't show off about it. He was not a show off at all. And I found him so refreshing and, a giant in the world of physics.
And as they say, right, Richard Feynman being one of the people, we say that we stand on the shoulders of giants. So thank you for joining us, Charles. It was a pleasure. And I'm sure our listeners will check out your website, charlesgrimes.com. Reach out to Charles and connect with him. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, wonderful audience, for being part of our show. Reach out to us like you always do. Let us know how we can serve and support you to live the best life you can.
Thank you.
And bring that joy in. And thank you, Juan, a tech genius.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.